So this student started off with a mind map. We could have put images in here to illustrate it, but it's not important. It's showing that flow of thoughts from that starting point. In this case, it's the natural features of the landscape, particularly looking at water. So what he's done then is he's moved on looking at an artist called Curt Jackson. That's his starting point. He's starting with the artist first and looking at how other artists have tried to show water in different ways. There's quite a lot of analysis on here. He talks about who Curt Jackson is and how he works and what his sort of thing is when he's working. And then underneath this flap here, he's got little developments and experiments where he's looked at the idea of the gradation of colour, the colour mixing, and he's used different types of materials to try and recreate that. The next artist he's looked at is an artist called Maggie Hambling. These are images of her work, and here he's used a little bit of polyfiller to create textures in the surface and then painted on it to try and recreate the idea of her work. He's done a similar sort of thing here. So he's experimenting with the way he's putting on the polyfiller, if he's dragging, if he's stippling, different ways that he can create marks. And again, he talks about that in the analysis. Here, it's looking at other artists who've layered and cut different fabrics or papers in different ways to create the idea of the movement of water in the waves. And then here he's looking at sort of some traditional Japanese stylized approaches, looking at the way that Hokusai did his piece of work called The Great Wave there. So if we look more moody people here, you know, this is his experiment where he scratched into the paper and stained it to try and create some of the images here. He might have had to go at some, you know, bleach drawing on black tissue or something like that to try and experiment further with how it was recreated. And then we go into his own research, his photographs. He's taken photographs of moving water. They're really high quality photos, close-ups of different textures of the bubbles or of ice and things like that. We've got some more here. And then he's gone to do some experimentation. He's put ink into water to try and capture some of the movement of the ink as it goes in. There's lots of things that show you how to do this sort of thing on YouTube. So he looked on there, got inspiration from that. And then he's linked in a Japanese marbling technique called sumi nagashi that we looked at in lessons. These are some different photographers' examples of the ink captured in the water, really quite stunning and sculptural. It could have been that he wanted to develop something in a 3D way from that, but he hasn't. That's not the way that he's gone. He's quite graphic-y. So what he's done is he's found these graphic collages by an artist called Jelly Martins, and he's looked at the way they've used the geometric shape and almost like that patchwork of photography and colour, plain, textured, all that sort of thing, and put them together. So these are the ones that he's looked at for inspiration, and this is where he's recreated his own version. He's done it on Photoshop, but it could quite easily be done by just physically cutting up different images and pieces. He's then started to play around and develop with some of those ink developments that he's done here, some of his photographs, changing the tones on some of these, changing the colours, and he's analysing it as he goes along. Now, obviously, this student was really interested in the photography element of the work, and he found an artist who does something called double exposure photography. She's called Sarah K. Byrne. I've put a guide out there for you showing different types of apps where you can do this sort of technique, or you can use Photoshop. So if you like the idea, you might want to play around with your particular theme. So here he's used the images of the developments that he's done and a photograph that he's taken, and he's given that double exposure effect to have the face and the textures coming through. Here he's developed digitally his collages, taking some of his designs inspired by the artist, but playing around with different coloured effects and the way that that affects the overall image. As it's got sort of brighter in colour, it's reminded him of the work of Hundertwasser and the way that he has patterns and combines that man-made and natural effect into his work. So he's put a little image there to link that in and make it make sense. Here, he's showing that development, the different backgrounds that he's got here, the gradient maps that he's experimented with on Photoshop, and then the Sarah K. Byrne pieces that have led through to his own piece here. And you can see the idea of the cutouts, the positive and the negative shape that is used in Sarah K. Byrne's work. It's something that he uses quite a lot in his development work, and you even see it in his final piece. Here, he liked his digital art, so he's been experimenting with different ways to change the portrait, taking the idea of sort of tree images and having those coming out of the back of the head. Then he's developed that into colour, inspired by pop art and the bright, vibrant colours of pop art. He's realised that he doesn't find that as successful, but here he's playing around with the positive and the negative shape. That idea of a silhouette and the pattern creating contrast. So this is an idea he likes. He's pushing forward that collage, but then bringing in that idea of the person, still linking to Hundertwasser, but using it in a different way. He's got some other experiments with colour there. Here, he's started to look at developing. He wants to bring in an idea of different levels, different surfaces, like the waterfall, the idea of things being on different heights. So he started to play around with how he could raise the geometric shapes. He's used corrugated cardboard, cut out the triangles and built them up, glued them together, painted them, seen what the difference is between when they're not painted. He's even thought about experimenting with some of that marbling effect that he got with the inks into the water. He's decided not to follow that through into the final piece, but he's still experimented, he's tried things, and that's what the development mark is all about. This is a photograph of his final piece, just so that we can start to see some of the ideas linking through. And then finally in his sketchbook, he's just got this piece that he experimented with. Again, that idea of building up layers. So he cut out the silhouette shape out of corrugated cardboard. He's painted it just with some emulsion paint. And then with some brush out inks, he's added them around the edge, added water and let the water run and create the effect itself. You know, again, the project was all about water, all about movement and water. So actually using it to create marks is another way of him experimenting. So this is the final piece. You can see he's brought together different elements, including the silhouette shapes of the face and the textural qualities that we found inspired by Maggie Hambling right at the beginning, where he's used that polyfiller and paint to create textural effects. He's brought in the relief idea, the raised and sunken areas, almost like a waterfall. You've got different heights going on. He's got his patchwork effect that he created digitally with his photographs there in different colourways, so they contrast with each other. And you can see that there's quite clear links to the project all the way through. You can see elements from his experimentation and his research in this final piece.